Well, we've just heard that Cas Covardia is not going to make it to our studio today. So telling you before the break that he was going to be wheeled in here was a little premature. He's not well, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Well, a majority of stock exchanges worldwide came under cyber attacks last year. Almost 90% of them perceive such activities to be a potential systemic risk. For the bourses, cyber crimes could have massive financial and reputational impacts. Leila Fourie, Director of Post-Trade Services at the JSE Limited, joins us live from the stock exchange itself. Leila, this was a research report that was put together by the World Federation of Exchanges. And as mentioned in the introduction there, systemic risk seems to be becoming heightened by guys playing around and trying to get into the JSE's, or not just the JSE, but any stock exchange systems, and making mischief and more.
Yes, absolutely. Alec, in fact, it's a very interesting trend we're seeing. Typically, whenever the economic cycle turns down, you see a rise in both fraud and social unrest and political activism. And the trend that we're seeing now is defined as hacktivism. And typically what you see is people flooding websites in order to effectively bring down the website and make a political or an ideological statement. And so it's a very interesting new and unusual channel that the broader community, in the form of either pressure groups, in some instances might even be terror groups, wanting to make a political or an ideological statement.
An ideological statements, Leila. What about making a bit of money? I mean, you must have to keep up. It's very difficult, rather, to keep up with criminals because they are so sophisticated. We've recently seen a flash crash in the United States of America. Whether that was finger trouble or whether that was someone actually being mischievous, I don't know. But it can happen, can't it? I mean, are you aware of this and are you guarding against it?
So at the JSE, we certainly are very vigilant and very cautious and very much aware of potential threats. In the exchange world globally, what you typically see is trading environments are separated from more publicly accessible technologies. And so the security and the firewalls that are constantly put up and the proactive surveillance in order to avoid those sorts of attacks are quite vigilant. Many of the instances that you read about on the internet or in the press around hacking or attacks on technology typically are found in publicly available mediums like websites. We haven't seen any exchange-related fraudulently motivated hacks.
So the times that the JSE has been out of service in the past couple of years has had nothing to do with hackers?
Absolutely nothing to do with hackers. We have not had any occurrences that have directly affected our market at all that are of concerning a fraudulent type hacking nature.
Leila, it is interesting though, the research says that the people who are going into the systems, or the cyber criminals as they are very strongly branded in the research, are not there to make money out of it. It's not for fraudulent purposes, but in fact to focus on destabilization, which is interesting because one would have thought that organized crime, if anybody, would have been able to fund its own hacking force.
Certainly, and I suppose it's an interesting concept because during the cycle, because the economic crisis is very much connected to the financial markets this time around. Many crises are driven by other mechanisms, but because ours at this point in time is a financial crisis, financial organizations are typically targeted as a very interesting point or channel to use in order to get a message across that's politically or ideologically motivated. Now, the exchanges globally are seen very much symbolically as a central point of capitalism and a very central part of the financial ecosystem, which would make an attack on these websites a logical sort of extension for those wanting to make a political statement in the financial sphere.
What sort of protection is there for investors, Lola? For example, let's say there was a flash crash which was perpetrated by criminals, and let's say that I was long of the all-share top 40 index at 40,000, the futures, for example, and there was a flash crash down to 35,000. I had my stops in at 39,000, which of course one has to on the futures market, and then the market goes straight back to 40,000 because it was indeed that, a flash crash. What insurance do I have against losing all my money?
Flash crashes could be driven by multiple different things, and at all times the JSE puts in place a number of very proactive activities and actions. Some of these are very IT and technically oriented, and others are more surveillance and action driven. And all trades are surveilled at on a constant basis for any form of insider trading or unusual patterns of behavior that might indicate inappropriate trading practices. Now, those would typically be proactively managed, and in the instance of a default that is caused by fraud, there are certain policies that are in place, but those are for very specific circumstances, and they would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
So just give us a little more comfort. Now, I think you've helped a little to, in that respect, in what you've just said to Lindsay. How big is your team? How switched on are they? We know that cyber criminals are mushrooming. How are you being able to defend investors against them?
Well, we have a very large and diverse team, and we have multiple layers of defense. So you would have, and I obviously for security reasons wouldn't be able to give you absolute details, but we would have a number of specialists which would be focused in technology, in the IT environment, in the regulatory environment, in an auditing environment, and we on a very regular basis have external reviews done. These reviews are on a constant basis communicated through very formal governance processes.
Dudley?
In fact, I signed off one that went to our board this week. And so there's a very comprehensive strategy that's in place rather to avoid any instances like this than to simply reactively respond to them.
Thanks.